competitive integrated employment. And what they mean here is that the setting is one that is typically in the competitive labor market. So these are not sheltered work. This is not mobile work crews. This is not enclaves. The employment, and that is something that I think we all understand, we wrap our heads around, and it didn't really, it wasn't really a change in our way of thinking because we had already made the decision not to close anyone as rehabilitated as sheltered employment a while back. But then RSA also provided additional guidance regarding settings that are not typically found in the community, and they included positions that are funded through the Javits-Wagner-O'Day Act, contracts or state purchase programs, and then also again allowances under the Fair Labor Standards Act for compensatory subminimum wage, and positions which require compliance with a mandated direct labor hour ratio for persons with disabilities. And with this guidance, they made it clear that VR agencies are expected to take into consideration these factors when determining if a position is considered competitive integrated employment. So, and in particular, the integrated piece, if it satisfies the integrated component. So, with that guidance in hand, DOORS made the decision and published the decision in a letter to our CRPs, explaining that we cannot use DOORS funding to assist in individuals in achieving employment in a position that is not considered integrated, and that per RSA's guidance, this includes positions which are Ability 1 positions or Maryland Employment Works positions, which require a hiring ratio for a certain number of individuals with disabilities versus not. And that these were positions which were set aside so that they were not considered to be typically available in the community, in the general labor market. So there was some scrutiny that came with the publication of that letter, scrutiny from Source America and several CRPs that have Ability 1 programs, and Maryland Works asked questions. We just had a lot of different people asking questions about this decision, and in particular saying, well, it looks like you're not really doing a case-by-case analysis. Now, we have been, as providers have been raising examples of Ability 1 programs that they have, we have been going out, different staff have been going out and doing reviews and writing up decisions. And primarily, in several of those instances, the reason for it not being considered competitive integrated employment was that these are set-aside positions. So we also have neighboring states that are handling this a little differently, and they produced different questions and so forth for provide the employers the ability with Ability 1 contracts to answer about their positions, and we decided to take some time and look at some of the different checklists and criteria and so forth that they devised, and we devised our own criteria that we are planning to use as we move forward with setting up a review process, identifying staff and setting up a review process in order to manage review requests and be able to hopefully identify positions which will broaden the opportunity for individuals to, based on their informed choice, take positions which are legitimately CIE. And so the questions that we developed on the next slide, and it'll be also on the next slide after that. There's 7 questions. The position pays an hourly wage at or above the state or local minimum wage rate, whichever is higher, for the area in which the employment site is located. This one's a no surprise at all. It's the competitive piece. At no time will the wages paid for this position be subject to time studies, to which non-disabled individuals are not also subject. So, and by that, what we mean is, in the first couple of months, an individual might be making minimum wage, and then they, after some time, they might be subject to a time study, and that might result in them having their wages reduced. But even if it doesn't, if their non-disabled peers are not being subject to time study, then this cannot be considered competitive employment if they are being subject to time study. And then an individual employed in this position will be eligible for the same level of benefits as non-disabled employees. Next slide. This position is and will continue to be available to the individuals hired, regardless of the service provider with whom the individual is connected. The position is not located within a setting established for the sole purpose of employing individuals with disabilities. The job duties of this position are not performed in a segregated environment in the community. The position provides the same opportunity for interaction with non-disabled individuals as experienced by non-disabled peers in the same or similar positions. And the position provides the same opportunities for advancement for individuals with the most significant disabilities as those available for non-disabled peers in the same or similar positions. So the strategy that we've been working on, a group of us have been working for several months on how do we want to develop or update our guidance on this item. How do we want to handle the process of accepting, receiving requests from employers to look at their positions? How are we going to update staff? All of those things Darlene will be going over shortly. But I want to emphasize that this is a process which we did take quite a while to develop. We had our SRC review it. We also asked the WNTAC to review the process, and our DDA partner has also been involved in a couple of the meetings and does not find any inconsistency in the approach that we're taking with how they are also thinking. But just like other states' decisions we are not beholden to, DDA will not be beholden to a decision that we make. They will go through their own decision-making process. But this is still a strategy that has already received a lot of review, and at the same time it's still developing. We're not saying that we're rolling this out next week. And part of the reason for that is that a while back, RSA published in the Federal Register a notice that the Secretary plans to issue a notice of proposed rulemaking in this month, which now there's another 5-6 days left. Okay, so 11th hour. But they're planning to issue a notice of proposed rulemaking to amend regulatory definitions, implementing programs under the Rehab Act as amended, and that this regulatory definition piece will have a component related to CIE. And so again, we're looking for this notice of proposed rulemaking to be coming out sometime this month. Who knows if what's happening in government might, for some reason, delay that. We don't know. We also know that they had already, over a year ago, sent out a request for comments and received a number of comments, and we haven't really seen anything happen as a result of that yet. And so we don't know when they're going to change, and what the changes may be. And so what we're thinking is we need to get rolling here. We don't want, again, our consumers to be denied opportunities for CIE. And so we, we will adjust if we need to, based on what code comes out. We have time. We're building time into our timeline. So go to the next slide. Let's look at our timeline. On February 14th, our CIE review team will receive instruction for how to, what to do when a request is received. And then we will be doing a webinar for CRPs on March 13th. There is a snow date for that for March 20th. And this is going to be a little different. If we do the training by webinar on March 13th, we will not do it again on the 20th. The webinar on the 13th will be recorded, and it will be made available for viewing for any CRPs or staff. There's a lot of turnover in CRPs. We have turnover, so we want to be sure that our staff have opportunities to see that, and that CRPs have opportunities to see that after we're done the training. We have some preparation that needs to be done on our DOORS website in the for our community partner section of the website. We want to get that ready for this change, and then we will be issuing formal policy change and a program directive during the last week of March, with a go-live date for this process as of April 1st. So as you can see, this is an update. This is a CIE update. At the moment, we're not making any changes in our policy on these positions. We have not had an opportunity to review them, to indicate whether or not our decisions as to whether or not they are CIE, and to convey that information. So we are not advising staff to invest funding in job development for those positions, or to let CRPs know that we can do that yet, not until we were further down the road here. But we did want you to know that this is something that's coming. And again, it's evolving. There are a couple of other things we wanted to be sure that you were aware of. Even when we implement this review process, and we advise staff of the decisions, and for those employment opportunities which we say are CIE, if they are Ability 1 positions or Maryland Employment Works positions, those will not be eligible for placement incentives. And the reason for that is that these positions have been created for the purpose of hiring individuals with disabilities, and they are subject to a ratio requirement for employing individuals with disabilities. So the incentive, or rather the motivation, is there for the employer to hire these individuals. So we are directing our incentives toward other positions, again, that are more, I guess, that are more challenging. It can be more challenging for individuals to achieve, and CRPs to get them into those positions. So I know that's going to be a difference, and it's going to require staff to really be attuned to, are these positions Maryland Employment Works or Ability 1 funded positions, so that you can know whether or not those are available for incentives. Another clarification that we wanted to share now is just about when to put somebody in Service E, which means to recognize that they're employed, and when to put them in employed status. And contextually, just to share that over the years, the past few years, we've noticed an increase in statewide, and the average increase in the number of days of an individual to be in employed status. And so it's gone from 4 months in January of 2019 to 7.5 months in January of 2019.
From 17.
17, 4 months in 2017 to 7.5 months in 2019. And so, and again, employed status means that they've already been employed for a while and now they're stable. And that employed status countdown begins when they've been declared stable. So if they've been employed an average of 7.5 months in January, then that means that they may, on average, have been employed for actually 8 or 9 months already. So, there's a number of reasons for that. Some of that is just being able to connect with the consumers after they've been employed for a while, and we understand that. We're continually looking for ways to make that easier, such as the work number and so on. But one reason that we think that might be happening is that individuals may be being put in employed status before they should be considered stable. And so we wanted to clarify this one area, which is it also really related to the change that came with WIOA, that individuals can be supported in employment by DOORS while they are also pursuing training. So when that training is leading to a specific employment goal, and they are employed in a goal in a job which is essentially it's a job to make ends meet while they're involved in school, but it is not their employment goal, then we are still providing services to help them reach their actual employment goal. And so we can go ahead and document that they're employed and put them in Service E, but we wouldn't put them in employed status by entering a stable date until we know that they are actually employed and stable, having achieved employment and stability employment that is consistent with their IPE goal. That, and in terms of, in case a question is asked later, that does not change for milestones. That does not change. You would still pay milestone 3 out after they have made the transition to BHA Extended Services Funding, which is at 45 days. Okay. And then also one last clarification on an item that has been raised to our attention. It involves when to close a case. In relation to having received the consumer's agreement to close the case. We know that our policy requires that the counselor has communicated with the consumer within 3 weeks of the prior to the closure to get the verification of the employment information, and that the consumer is satisfied and that the employment's going fine and so forth. Now, we want to emphasize that WTC employment specialists are very often helping with getting that information within the 3 weeks of the 90 days of employment stability. And when that employment specialist has received that okay to close the case from the consumer, the counselor does not need to take further steps to verify that it is okay to close the case, as long as all planned services have been provided. Okay, so you can take the WTC employment specialist's word in the service note and copy that over to the case note, put into your closure summary that the consumer has said it is okay to close the case. Okay, and hopefully that will avoid delays that really are not necessary in the closure process. Okay, so that is all that I had for my piece for the overview of competitive integrated employment and relative updates. Before I turn it over to Darlene to go over the process, were there any questions that have come in?
Yes, Matt Jackson asks if WTC is doing case closure discussions then.
Yes.
And I'm just going to add just to that. The reason, in case anybody is wondering why we don't take the word from CRPs that someone's ready to close their case, is because CRPs are CRPs, they're not VR specialists 1 or 2, whereas the WTC employment specialists are VR specialists. They can determine eligibility, they can, determine when a case should be closed. So if they let you know that the consumer has let them know it's okay to close their case, you can go ahead and take their word. You don't have to schedule another appointment or whatever. I mean, feel free to reach out to your consumer. We would always encourage that if you want to make a phone call or an email or whatever, but you don't have to schedule an in-person appointment just to discuss closure. You want to go ahead and move forward with that closure because the consumer's already indicated to a VR specialist at WTC that they want their case closed.
Another question, can we also accept the final wage verification from WTC staff?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, that's part of it.
Repeat the question.
Yeah.
So the question is, can we also accept the wage verification with the final wage verification from WTC staff? And that is fine.
Can the verification also come from the BSR?
Yes. Now the BSR.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. The verification can come from the BSR, but the BSR typically is not a VR specialist, so they can't determine whether or not the case can be closed. So you can, of course, accept the verification, but then you would still have to have the discussion with the consumer as to whether or not they want their case closed. So it's a little different than WTC employment specialist.
Mm-hmm. And it's good clarification.
Yeah.
Okay, looks like that's all. Okay.
Wait, one more. And does the verification need to be on the form, or can it be an email?
If all of, well, who are we speaking of?
Yeah, from the BSR or from
WTC.
So look at the VR's supervisory approval checklist and the email. When the email is acceptable, as long as the documentation that we would request on the form is in that email, I think that's fine.
Is that it? Yeah. Okay. Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to provide a little bit of an overview of what the process will look like. I think this may be a process that evolves, but we have been very thoughtful. As John mentioned, we've had a lot of meetings, we've had a lot of discussions about, how can we make this as simple as possible, how can we streamline it, and how can we track these requests. Right now, we may be getting them at the counselor level, BSR level, and even in headquarters. So we want to make sure that we're able to track them and be able to make a thorough review of each individual position. So the first thing is the CRP, Ability One, or Employment Works employer, so that's who has to actually submit the request, completes an online CIE review request. That submission is what triggers the whole review process. It's a survey gizmo form. It's fairly straightforward and easy, and I'll go through some of the elements of what that form looks like in a minute. But as John mentioned, there will be a webinar and information disseminated to the CRPs prior to going live. So they will have this information and this process in advance and should know where to find it and how to do it. It's going to be on our website, so it will be, they'll have easy access to it. And if they have any questions, there will be a number for them to call. The online request will automatically be sent to a dedicated email box, which is similar to what we do with our Quest internship applications. And that email box will be managed by Kate Drake, myself, and Beth Ann Curdy, our administrative aide. So we'll be checking it regularly to see when those requests come in. And then once they're submitted, they will actually receive a confirmation email automatically that it's been received and that someone will be contacting them within 7 business days. If they answered false to any of those 7 questions that John outlined, they're automatically going to get an email that's generated that says the position doesn't meet the requirements of CIE. However, on that form, there is a comment section, so they might provide additional information, or maybe there's maybe they're not sure about a question and they answer fast, but they want to talk it through with someone. So we will be following up on those as well. In other words, if it just says it said it's not CIE, we're still going to look at the information to see if there's anything that makes us think that we should look at this a little more thoroughly. At that point, once we receive it, Kate and I will review the documents, the actual form, as well as any associated documents such as the position description, and take a good hard look at those. We'll contact the employer if we feel like there's additional information that's needed. For an example, maybe they didn't attach the position description, or maybe the position's description is very vague or not, doesn't have enough information on it. Maybe the comment that they provided, we've determined needs some follow-up, so we might follow up about some of the comments they made, or even if they answered false to a particular question. So we will follow up with them. At that point, we're going to look at these positions, at the information, and if we feel there's enough information to satisfy the requirements that a position meets the definition of CIE, we would notify the employer, and then that position will be added to the list on our DOORS website. So we're essentially going to have a list on our website that indicates every position that we've reviewed and made a determination on whether it's CIE, yes or no. If there's not enough information, or it's determined that an on-site visit should be conducted, we will assign the review to an appropriate staff member. And I'm going to review that CIE review team on the next slide. But then the on-site review will be conducted, and the reviewer will contact the employer, set up an on-site visit, and we are currently this is still evolving, we're just still developing some guidance on specific things that those reviewers are going to be looking for or asking when they go on site. And that information will be shared in our February meeting with the CIE review team. So they'll be given information on how they should be looking at, what questions to be asking related to the different questions that were on the form. Once that review is completed, the determination is made, the reviewer, whoever it is, will share that information back to me or Kate, and then the results of that review, we will notify the employer, and then again place the determination on the website. So we're still working on the back end of what the list is going to look like, but generally it'll be grouped by employer, position, location, and indication of whether it was deemed CIE or not. If it's a contract position, we will probably have a contract end date. And I'm thinking, as I said, it's evolving. When John was talking, it made me think that maybe we should indicate whether it is an Ability One or Employment Works contract right on that website. So that'll be helpful for the counselor, again, when they're looking at that. They'll be able to look at that on the website as well. If the employer then, once it's been deemed ECIE, if the employer requests assistance with recruitment, staff will be notified via email, BSRs, that it has been deemed CIE and that they are currently recruiting for the position, and then BSRs can assist with pre-screening any candidates. The BSRs frequently send out a lot of job leads, and they're looking for candidates for a lot of private employers. So the process will be the same, that, if you have a candidate, you should refer them to the BSR for pre-screening to make sure that they have everything they need to apply for that position, and that they can be successful in connecting to that employer. We're going to have an internal tracking sheet just for our use, so that we will know where each request is along in the process. It's going to have when it was received, who the employer is, and their contact information, the position, where it's located, and the name of the staff person who was assigned to be the reviewer. And then finally, of course, when the determination comes in, we'll be able to put that on there, and then that'll be the basically the trigger to add it to the website. So if you do think, if you are a counselor, did tell a CRP, you should do a online CIE request, and the counselor's wondering, they haven't heard anything, it's not on the website, and they want to know if it's in the process, they can contact us, and we can check and see if it actually was received and where we are in the process. Additionally, we'll be keeping files in our office, related to our CIE reviews.
2 questions before I move forward, if that's okay. Just for clarification, so the reviewer makes a determination, but the recommendation goes back to Darlene and Kate, and they make the final determination of CIE?
We will review what the reviewer has indicated, yes.
Okay.
You ask the question again. I didn't hear the question.
So the reviewer makes the determination, but the recommendation goes back to Darlene and Kate, and they make the final determination of CIE.
Right. So we'll basically just make sure everything's needed, everything that was needed, all the questions, the guidance that we've provided. I'm thinking we're going to have an additional little checklist maybe for those reviewers for the things that we talked about in terms of the 7 questions and things they'll be looking at when they go on site. And then we'll look at that, and then we're going to say yes, it is, or no, it's not. We agree, and put it on the website.
One more question. How would DOOR staff request CIE review? That's what you just said.
Yeah, DOOR staff cannot request a CIE review. Staff cannot request it, and I'm going to go through that when I go over the form, because the employer has to be the one to request it, because they're providing the information about everything that we need that's necessary, and they're certifying that information. And I'll go into that a little deeper when I review the form.
Thank you.
Next slide.
Okay, this slide basically is just a little flow chart, sort of represents the basic flow of how the requests will come in. You see the CIE request is received. Kate and I have the primary responsibility of reviewing the initial request materials and determining if an on-site review is needed and assigning the review to that individual or to the CIE reviewer. And I should mention Tony Cobb-Cannon will also be involved in this process, as you'll see. Those positions that are with a set-aside contractor through Ability One or Employment Works will be handled primarily by the regional business services representatives, Jesse Ferrio, Stephen Shields, Wanda Peel, James Dean, Will Brownlee, and Crystal McKay. And at times, we'll also be calling on someone from WTC Employment Services and Deaf Services to conduct the on-site visit. And that might be because of the volume we're getting, the location, or something of that nature that we may call on other staff to do those. We'll consult with both Jessica Halls and Penelope Shook on those requests when we're going to assign it, or either to ask them to do it or someone on their staff. So they'll be involved in that process and now. We may also ask Mutasam Fadl from OBDS, an employment specialist there, to assist as needed, maybe with BISM and Columbia Lighthouse for the Blind types of positions. For those positions where a CRP is the employer of record and the position is located within the CRP, Kate Drake will work with Tony Cobb-Cannon to review those positions, and Jill Pierce will also assist or consult on any that are DDA providers. So that's our review team. Basically, I want to say, obviously, this is a team effort. There are a lot of moving parts to this. And so, although that's our kind of thought going forward, there may be instances where we're calling on the BSRs to help with a position in a CRP or vice versa, depending on the need as we go along. Any questions on that? No. Okay, so I'm just going to review the elements of the request form itself. As I said, it's a survey gizmo, and it's been tested by all of us, by our staff as well as the SRC, and it works pretty well. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty easy. It's easy to attach documents. At the beginning of it is a page of basically the background and the explaining why it's necessary to conduct this review. The first thing is going to be the employer contact information, which is basically the name of the person requesting the review, their email, phone number, and the employer, who is the employer of record. Then there's going to be a question of whether they're currently recruiting for the position. And we want to know this because we want to give priority to those for which they're currently recruiting for. We've had a few people ask us from CRPs if maybe somebody on the SRC, if they could be proactive and just send in positions to be reviewed even if they weren't currently recruiting for it. And we're certainly willing to do that, but we think that we need to, the priority needs to be on those that are being recruited for currently. I think, I think the league had given us an example. If they had a housekeeper position at the league, could they proactively send that in even though they weren't recruiting currently? But we've determined that that's something they can do, but we're going to give priority as they come in by date and by if they're currently recruiting. The employer of record is always going to be a CRP or a set-aside contractor under Ability One or the Employment Works programs. That's always going to be the employer. It's going to be one of those, right? It's either a CRP that maybe is a set-aside contractor or maybe not, or an Ability One or Maryland Works contractor. Then there's going to be the position and location and business address, which would be the name of the business where the individual will work. So for an example, for some Ability One contractors, it might be Fort Detrick. That's not the employer of record, but that's where the location is. So we might have environmental services position at Fort Detrick, okay? But the employer of record might be, I don't know, Melwood. Could be SSA, Social Security Administration. It could be the Motor Vehicle Administration for an Employment Works contract in Glen Burnie. Or it could say it could be at the league, which might be, then that's a CRP. It's located within the CRP. It's going to indicate the position title and then the 7 true or false questions that John has already went over. And then there is a comment section for them to add any additional information. There's also a requirement to attach a position description. So there's a place there for them to browse and select that and attach that. And then there's a question asking, is this a set-aside contract? And it's a checkbox. It's either Ability One, Maryland Employment Works, or not applicable. So we're going to be able to easily distinguish between a position that is a set-aside position versus one that's within a CRP. And then the last thing is a signature by the person sending this form in, certifying that they are the authorized rep and are certifying that the information they provided is true and correct. Failure to provide, then there's a comment that says failure to provide true and correct information could subject the CRP to sanctions by DOORS. So we want to make sure that the information they're giving us is accurate and that they're certifying that that information is, is what they're saying it is and what we're requesting. And that's why the request always has to be submitted by the employer because they're certifying that information. And a job coach, counselor, BSR may not know all of those details of the position and cannot certify for the employer. So that's why, staff can't request the review. So as I said, this is an evolving process and list. All the requests are going to come through the online system. Counselors, job coaches, BSRs, employment specialists, et cetera, should direct set-aside contractors or CFPs with open positions to the website where they can complete the request form. Now, I want to give you a couple of examples. Maybe a job coach calls a counselor and says, hey, I see this position with a CRP. It's a Ability One contract position. Do you know if it's CIE? And is it okay for me to help Johnny apply for this position? So at that point, really, the counselor or that job coach, they should have this information in advance, as you know, should be able to check the website to see if it's on the list, if that position's on the list. Now, obviously, the first, I imagine, couple of months, it's going to be very few positions that we've actually reviewed on the list, you know, as it evolves. But as we get through the process and more, and we start seeing different ones, I think that we're able to approve without the on-site reviews. Some of them we'll be able to put on the list. If it's not on the list, then I would suggest that job coach or the counselor reach out to that Ability One contractor and ask them, hey, have you done a request? Or we can check to see if they've done a request. But can you do this online review request? And then we'll get it into the process. They're going to have this information in advance. It'll be on the website. As I mentioned, priority is going to be given to the ones that by date and whether they're currently recruiting. This process, I think, will evolve over time. We have no idea how many requests we're going to get, how long, how often, or how many might require on-site visits at this point. But we do want to, you know, process them first come, first serve basis, as well as those who are currently recruiting, because we want our consumers to have the opportunity for that employment if it is CIE. We're also going to focus first on those opportunities primarily within the Maryland boundaries. I know there are a lot in the Washington, D.C. area we'll get requests for, and we'll work them into the system, into the schedule. Please be patient. It's going to take some time for us to develop this list, for us to do the reviews. Currently, there's no list. Until we begin receiving these review requests, we won't be able to start populating that list. Like all of you, the staff who will be assisting with the CIE reviews do have other responsibilities, so we're going to try our best to get them done in a very timely manner as quickly as possible. And questions?
We do have a question from Matt Jackson.
Okay.
Field would like to have a bit more discussion on situations where the counselor and supervisor gather details on potential CIE job and need official decision. We should not have to go through employer request. We will have separate internal requests. Will we have a separate internal request form? Thanks.
No, we're not. This is going to be our process at this point. It's a way for us to track these requests, right?
Yeah. I would say that talking to specifically to Matt, if you've already requested that information and you have a stack of it or whatever, you have information in writing, let the employer know that, you know, you've already done that, but they need to contact Darlene directly through the website, and just kind of, you don't want to make them do work twice, but if you have that, then maybe you can send that information to Darlene, but the employer still has to do the formal request so that it can be tracked. So maybe we can share the documentation that we already have.
Because they have to go through and certify every one of those questions. I mean, right now as it stands, you know, following the RSA guidance we've been saying generally, like RSA guidance says, if it's a contract or set-aside position, we're not really even considering it, or it felt like we were even able to consider it. So we're opening that door a little bit, but we want to make sure that we're not just going down a wrong path where it's going to come back later and say, you know, we got all these people back in segregated situations, or situations where this is the type of employment they're being pushed towards because it's easy. And, I've had this discussion with some of the other staff, for my responsibility, I see us out there developing relationships with businesses and having job opportunities, but not getting candidates. So it'll be interesting to see as this evolve, where we suddenly have all these candidates for these Ability One positions or Employment Works positions. Because some of these positions with private employers are competitive integrated employment that don't require a review. And we can certainly, find candidates to perform many of those jobs. So that's just my little plug. But, I think that I have heard some comments from some counselors, from CRP, job coaches, and even some of my BSRs, because the Ability One contractors are still knocking on our door saying, help us recruit for these positions. And right now we're not even considering it, really. So we're trying to open up the door, but we want to be cautious in doing this. And also keeping in mind, we don't know what's going to happen at the federal level with, the notice of proposed rulemaking.
And we don't want to neglect other employers.
And honestly, I know we're trying to take one thing, responsibility away from the counselor in terms of getting that request from whether it's an employer or a job coach, and they have to figure it out, and who do they contact and how they get this done. We're trying to remove that. I think this is what we've come up with, and the best way to track these requests and to try to monitor the situation, and we'll see how it goes as we get into this.
So the counselor does not, and the job developer does not complete the request. It's the employer who completes the request, and either the counselor or the job developer can advise the employer to complete the request. Go to the website, click the link, and fill out the request form.
Yep.
Yeah.
2 more questions. Will each individual position need to be reviewed, or if the employer is approved, all the positions are considered CIE?
Mm-hmm. We're looking at individual positions.
But let me just
there
add,
may be a group,
Yeah.
right? For an example, let's say there's a contract at Fort Detrick, with an Ability One contractor, and it's 20 environmental service positions or janitorial positions. We're not gonna have every single one. It's going to be the position title and the location, and we're going to review that. So, and when we go out, like in that instance, we probably would do a site review. And we want to see, okay, if you have 20 of them, how are they interacting? Is this a roving enclave? I mean, we're going to need to look at that, because we don't want people to be in those segregated. Yes, Jim has
a live question.
Once we decide if business, company, or organization is going to meet qualifications on an individual case-by-case basis, it sounds like, will RSA or someone in the federal government say yes or no, or we do this on our own?
Okay,
That's a great question.
Yeah, it is a good
Yeah.
question. So the question Jim had is, once we make our determination, is someone going to review that? Is RSA or someone at the federal level going to review that? And the answer is no. We have, and that's why we've decided to initiate this process, because we've had conversations with RSA. We've been, saying to them, trying to get them to answer the question. And they're basically saying they're not going to question the state's decision, but that we need to have a process. And again, this is why we need to track these. We need to have a process to do a case-by-case analysis. So they're leaving it up to us, and that's the way we're going forward. We know that there are other states that are doing something a little similar, like we have looked at other states' checklists and things. There are many states that were doing exactly what we were doing. But I think we all know, and I know they're hearing it, across across the country and certainly at the federal level that employment outcomes are down. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that we're dismissing all these set-aside positions as not being CIE, not being CIE. And so we want to look at them and see if, and I can give an example. I'm not going to say the employer, but I went out and did a review. They were warehouse positions. It looked like any other warehouse. You couldn't tell who had a disability, who didn't. They provided information on several employees who began in one position and who were promoted. They even created a position where they saw a need for that was also a promotion for someone. By all accounts, it looked like any other warehouse competitive integrated employment, but it was a set-aside contract. And so we said no, set aside. There was an Ability One contract. So we said in our determination no based on the RSA guidance, which says generally they're not in the competitive labor market, those positions. And even if you look at the definition of what Ability One program, it's supposedly set up for people who can't compete in the competitive labor market. But it's evolved over time, so it's not what it always was. There are a lot of Ability One contracts for just one or two positions, different places that are integrated. And that's why we don't want to just dismiss them automatically.
Another online question. Outside of the warehouse example you just mentioned, have you already looked at other places such as Chimes at the airport and approved them?
No.
We've looked at it, we haven't approved it. Under previous.
Yeah. But not under these new.
Not under
this new
process.
process. Nothing's been looked at yet.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Okay, with that, then we are early, which is not a bad thing. It's 10:30. We'll take a break until 10:45, and then we'll resume.
We're back. And we're unmuted so everyone can hear us. Yay! A few things to address before we start rolling into our supported employment follow-up. There were some questions that rolled in from out there in the webinar land that we wanted to address first.
Yep.
Jody?
So a couple things came up. There was some discussion going back and forth. So if I want to go back to the fact that WTC may be getting information that indicates from the consumer that they're ready to close their case. So just to clarify and to be in line with policy, if we have a pay stub or an email from the consumer or the employer, if WTC receives that information, they can then forward that information to the DOORS counselor to prepare for closure. So WTC is using the supervisory checklist, and just they're not completing it because that's a responsibility of the counselor, but they're using that as a guide to make sure that the consumer really is ready to close. So they're using the verification form if there is no pay stub or email from the consumer or the employer. So you will get that verification form as well. They'll have it signed by the consumer and then attach that into a service note or to the email.
Sure.
Okay, so the verification form will be attached into the service note, and then they'll send you an email saying the consumer wants to close their case. So then kind of a follow-up question that came from Westminster. If the consumer has checked the box on the verification form that they don't require any further services, Westminster wanted to know, do they still have to contact the consumer to close their case? And the answer is yes, unless the consumer has already told WTC Employment Services that they want their case closed. They need to have some conversation with a DOORS VR counselor in order to verify that they're ready to close the case. That checkbox alone does not do it. Okay? Does that make sense to everyone? Okay.
All right. So let's go to the next slide.
It kind of froze up.
Uh-oh.
It's on a break still.
Technical difficulties.
So before we get to the next slide, I just want to remind everyone that these, I think John mentioned in the beginning, but the next several, dozen slides or so, these are questions actually that we have gathered from staff and from CRPs since last July. So the questions have been coming into Jill or to Kate. So we've taken all of those questions and answered them and put them on the slides. So and they're grouped together in certain topics. So.
This is sort of going to be the OFS Q&A show. So there's a lot of information on the slides. We will be reading some of it verbatim, so bear with us. We'll try to make it as exciting as possible. I make no promises beyond that, though. A lot of questions were about the fading schedule. And if you remember from the training back in July, there were 3 different Excel spreadsheet fading schedules. So a lot of questions around that. Do we have to follow them exactly? Is there any leeway one way or the other? What if someone doesn't need it? A lot of different questions. So we're going to start addressing some of those questions. So the first question that comes in, is there a minimum number of job coaching hours expected under short-term job coaching services?
The answer is no. There's no minimum number of job coaching hours expected during the short-term job coaching. However, once the consumer requires minimal support and the job coaching is less than 25% of the hours that the consumer is working per week, then stabilization should be considered. You move the status. The number of hours to be authorized really depends on the number of hours the consumer is working and what the unique needs of that consumer will be. The key when you're using the fading schedule, whether it's short-term, the BHA long-term, or the DDA long-term, or the natural supports, is to see that fading is occurring.
Remember, it's a guide. It's not, you must use these hours. It must be exactly this. A lot of questions that came in were, this situation doesn't fit this guide doesn't fit my particular consumer situation. Do I have to follow it still? And the answer is no. It's a guide. It's a guide to assist you when entering estimated agency costs and when drafting authorizations for job coaching. You tailor the situation to your consumer. Okay? It can be more, it can be less. If it's a lot less or a lot more, you might want to ask, what's going on? What am I missing? And that opens a conversation between you and the consumer and the job developer, job coach. All right. Next slide, more fading schedules. Question number 2, when providing short-term or supported employment coaching hours, is there a required percentage of coaching hours that must be provided on site?
And the answer is no. Again, so there is no minimum number of hours that the job coaching has to be provided on site. Just be aware that if you're doing the job coaching to develop natural supports, that really is best going to be done on site. It's hard to develop natural supports if you're strictly doing the job coaching off site. Okay.
Next slide, we're going to talk about fees, invoicing, and reporting.
Okay, what hours should the CRP list on the RS7D, which is the Employment Progress Report?
And the answer, as all of you can read, should list the actual number of hours the consumer worked each week and, as importantly, the number of hours that job coaching was provided each week, even if coaching isn't provided every day that the consumer worked. This information helps the counselor determine the amount of fading that occurs. As in an example on here, let's say the consumer works 40 hours in a week and 20 hours of job coaching is provided. Then the form should reflect both the total hours worked, which is 40, the total hours of job coaching provided that week, which is 20, as well as the daily record of hours used for actual daily record of hours used for job coaching. Make sense? I don't know about you all, but when I was reading these slides, and even though I helped put them together, I had to read things about 4 times. So feel free to say slow down or I don't get something. And I'll promptly say, well, just read it yourself. I'll get back to you. Tough crowd.
Yeah.
Tough crowd. All right. I'm trying to liven this up. People work with me, not against me. Thank you, Mr. Inzio in the back.
All right, next question.
Jody has to put up with so much with me. It's unbelievable.
All right, what is the employment stability follow-along fee?
What is that fee? Well, it's $200, and it's available to providers who have provided the short-term job coaching or job coaching to transition to natural supports to assist the individual as needed to maintain job stabilization. Whew, right out of policy. What are we doing with this? This is a way to say to the CRPs, to the job placement people, rate the person stable. Appreciate that, which means the clock is counting for us, which means if the consumer has a slight problem, we want that consumer to feel comfortable contacting you without reversing the stabilization date that we put in there, okay? It's a $200 help out when you can. However, if during that helping out when you can, there's a real issue that arises, we need that job developer to contact doors and say, this is more than just a short-term fix. There's something substantial going on here, and we need to rethink reversing the stabilization date. Okay? Does that make sense?
So just to clarify, so this service should be authorized at the same time that the job coaching is authorized. That way, it's all in one authorization, and then the provider can bill for it at the time of stabilization. That way, they're kind of getting paid in advance to provide that 90 days. Yeah, and I just wanted to, I'm just looking at this grade. I just want to stress the employment stability follow-along fee is not an incentive. So you don't have to worry about whether or not they qualify for an incentive. It's a separate standalone fee that we're offering to help maintain that stability without providing intense job coaching.
Make sense? Do you have questions?
Not related to that.
Not related to that, okay.
Not related to that. All right. We'll come back to you, Mr. Inzio. I see you out there. All right, next slide. Question number 5. Do you want to do that one?
Yeah. Does the $200 employment stability follow-along fee apply to all 3 fading schedules?
No. The fee is not available when individuals have transitioned to extended services funded by long-term supports. So if you've got a case that's going to be transitioning to DDA or BHA, do not look for that to be on an invoice. Do not look to be paying that $200 fee, because that organization is going to be getting their money from DDA or BHA. Okay? If you do see it on there, that's a problem. You should contact the CRP or whomever and say, should not be having that fee on there.
Well, it shouldn't be.
Authorized.
It shouldn't
Right,
have been authorized.
Yeah.
Well, we also know that sometimes
I
things
know.
come in on the invoice.
I
that were
know,
not
but that's
authorized.
that's one of the reasons why we're putting the employment stability follow-up fee on the same authorization as the job coaching for short-term job coaching or intensive funding prior to natural supports, so that they see when they can invoice for the stability follow-up fee.
Good point.
Just a little break, little PSA. So you'll see the fee referenced as the follow-along fee or the follow-up fee. That's actually intentional. It's not an error. It's because of the way AWARE is set up. In one area we have to use follow-along, in the other we use follow-up, and we're going to try to correct that, but
It's just
it's the same thing. It's the same thing.
It's the same fee.
Same fee. Okay, when is this $200 employment stability follow-along fee invoiced?
Well, I think we've already covered this, but the fee may be billed at the date of job stability with a report that documents DOORS and the consumer agree upon the stability date. So we've already covered that a little
Yeah,
bit.
I just hadn't mentioned the report, but the report is important.
Oh, yes. Don't pay anything without a report, please. Fees, invoicing, or we're up to number 7. Still me?
Question number 7.
Question number 7, thank you. Are there specific reporting requirements at the end of the 90-day follow-along phase?
Yes, so the key in that question, it's at the end of the 90-day follow-along phase, not during, but at the end. So yes, the CRP must complete the employment stability follow-up section of the Employment Services Progress Report, which I believe is page 3 on RS 70, and that's at 90 days of stability. A formal report is not required during the first 2 months of the follow-along. However, it is imperative that the counselor remain in contact with the consumer and the CRP during those first couple months. The CRP must also provide updated employment information with either the consumer's signature or a pay stub for wages earned during the 3rd month of employment. So that's the documentation that's required prior to closure. This information must be attached to the CRP invoice for payment incentives, follow-along fee, and/or employment verification fee.
Question 8. Is the $100 employment stability verification fee at 90 days an incentive? And does it apply to all 3 fading schedules?
So this is, just so you know, even though they're on the same slide, one is the $200 follow-along fee, and one is the $100 employment stability verification fee at 90 days. So there's no services required in that 90 days, but they are verifying that the consumer is still employed and stable at the end of 90 days. So no, it's not an incentive. It only applies to the short-term fading schedule. And it's a standalone fee that's available when CRPs have provided consumers short-term job coaching, the consumer has not transitioned to extended support employment services, and no other placement incentives are available. I see a lot of people nodding their head yes, so I think you got that, but go ahead, Jessica.
I had a question, just back about question number 4. So the fee's going to be paid up front. So whether they get that emergency call after stable or not, they're still going to get the $200.
Yes.
So what about somebody who never had a job coach, but still runs into that, maybe that little situation midway through when the clock has already started ticking? What do you authorize to then maybe put some supports in place?
It depends on what they need. If it's just something that they need to discuss with their counselor, then the counselor can handle it, or the WTC employment specialist, whoever is working with them. If it's something major and they're going to require training or a job coach or something, then we would take them out of the stable status and then provide that service. All right, we're on question number 9. Is it possible for an employed individual to achieve job stability upon placement?
Absolutely. Someone can start a job and not need any kind of supports. If they don't require ongoing supports or other services required to maintain stability, it's absolutely possible. It's not a wait and see how things are going before putting in stability date.
Okay.
So with those instances, the employment start date and the stable date can be the same.
Okay, question 10. If a CRP is authorized to provide job development, job placement, but does not provide job coaching, are they able to request payment for placement incentives and the employment stability verification fee at 90 days?
So we're looking at 2 things. Can they request payment for placement incentives as well as the verification fee at 90 days? So here's the long answer. In order to bill for placement incentives, the CRP does not need to provide job coaching to the individual, but the CRP must have prior authorization to provide job development for the individual. Once the individual is employed and has achieved stability for 90 days, the CRP may bill for any applicable incentives, even if job coaching was not provided. The $100 employment stability verification fee at 90 days is not an incentive, and I think we've already touched on that a little. It is a standalone service fee that is available to CRPs only when, 1, consumers received short-term job coaching, 2, the consumer has not transitioned to extended supported employment services, and 3, no placement incentives are available. All quiet.
Okay, just checking.
I know. Question short. Question 11. Is hourly job coaching available after a stable date is confirmed and agreed upon with doors?
And the short answer is no. Hourly doors funded job coaching will not be authorized after the stabilization date, but the expectation is that the CRP will provide follow-along to support the individual in maintaining stability.
So essentially, just keep in mind, everyone, as I'm sure you are, once you're stable, once that consumer is stable, all payment to support that individual really stops after you may have done that $200 follow-along fee, okay? But everything else, any kind of job coaching hours is done, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
until you get to question 12.
Until you get to question 12. Nice segue. So 12, what can be done if something happens after the employment stability date and during the course of 90 days? A new supervisor or new expectations, a new task that requires training, and the individual needs or requests additional job coaching. Can a CRP request additional job coaching hours from doors and negotiate a new employment stability date?
Right. So again, we're repeating some of these things, but that's how the questions came into us. So, excuse me. So the answer is, if a CRP is authorized to provide the employment stability follow-along services, then they are expected to support the individual during minor changes, such as the new supervisor. However, if the individual requires intensive supports after stability date has been determined, this should be discussed with the doors counselor and consumer. An email, so it's in parentheses, but it's important. An email from the CRP requesting additional hours is not sufficient. This needs to be a conversation between you, the counselor, and the consumer to find out what the needs really are. If it's confirmed that the individual requires intensive job coaching, then the employment is no longer considered stable and additional hours may be provided pending doors administrative approval. So if you're going to change from what you've already agreed to and you're going to take them out of stable and you're going to provide additional job coaching, then you would need administrative approval to do that. And part of that is just a lot of counseling and guidance, trying to figure out what the problem is and trying to help the consumer adjust and resolve it on their own without constantly relying on the job coach. So, do what you can, but if it looks like the job coach is really needed, then by all means provide that. Okay.
Next slide. Placement incentives. These incentives are available to any CRP who has prior authorization to provide job development services. If no incentives apply to the consumer, then the CRP may request authorization for the employment stability verification fee at 90 days. All right, so we're talking about incentives. We're encouraging job developers to look beyond the usual, look beyond the norm, work with the difficult populations, thus the incentive to work a little harder to help our consumers. Am I doing the question?
You can do the
I'll do the question. All right, 13. What documentation is required for requesting the placement incentive authorization after stabilization? So the 3 steps involved.
Yeah, so the CRP has 3 steps. So first, at job placement, the CRP will provide the Employment Services Progress Report, the CRP Employment Verification, and Placement Incentive Request, so depending on what they're requesting, and any other documentation that contains the following information. So you need the employment start date, the wage information, including tips if applicable, the average hours worked, the position title, position description, and the ONET code. So that's step 1. So step 2, at employment stability, whenever that occurs, if it's 5 days, 5 weeks, whatever, at employment stability, the CRP will request an authorization for the applicable incentives by providing the progress report, the R7D, and the CRP employment verification and placement incentive if that applies. Again, the employment stable date, updated employment information regarding the occupational title, hourly wage, including tips, and average hours per week. So they're providing that information again, just confirming that where they started in employment and where they're now at stable is the same or has it changed. And then the next slide, we move to step 3, which is after 90 days after the stable date, the CRP will invoice doors for the incentives for which an authorization has been received or for the verification of employment stability at 90 days. So it's one or the other. Again, as long as that's been authorized. And again, they're going to include the same information, the supporting wage, hours worked, occupational title. For instance, that could be a pay stub. It could be the doors employment verification self-report form, the RSA as well as the Employment Services Progress Report and the CRP Employment Verification and Placement Incentive Request. The consumer signature or copy of pay stub for wages earned during the 3rd month of employment is required for doors to pay the CRP. So we have to have that, whether it's from the CRP or from WTC, we have to have that wage information during that 3rd month.
Let's take a break. I see a bunch of questions rolling in.
Happening.
So
Yes.
let's try to address some of those if we can.
Let's start with Elise. We'll get back to Beth. It's not related. Will we be changing the wage verification form to no longer include post-employment services checkbox now that PES is discontinued?
Yes.
So
Eventually,
yeah,
we will.
The question relates to post-employment services and the wage verification form. Is that right?
Yeah.
And because post-employment services, as we currently know it and have been using it, is going away, are we getting it off that form?
Eventually, we will be editing that form. We haven't received the formal technical assistance circular from RSA that we know is actually written and in the queue to be published. It's because of the fact that we were lucky enough to ask the question when RSA was monitoring us, and then we got some follow-up information from WinTAC a while back that clued us in to these changes that RSA is anticipating. But we haven't made any formal changes to the policy around post-employment until we see exactly how RSA is wording it. But the understanding that we are getting is that we need to be providing the services while the case is open, and so the context around post-employment services will be changing.
Which is why we've encouraged counselors to close out the post-employment service cases that currently exist. And I think I checked yesterday, I think we're down to 54 statewide. So as those can be closed, that would be good. We'll be ready for whenever the guidance comes out from RSA. So, good question.
Okay, next question. I have a question from a CRP who requested these after consumer has maintained employment within 90 days and after stable date. They want to be paid with fees. The special disability population, $250 incentive. Supported employment natural supports for $450, and the ticket to work substantial gainful activity $400. Is this doable? Please advise. That's a lot.
There's a lot in that question. I'm just going to read it again just to make sure we got it. So a CRP requested these incentives after the consumer has maintained employment, so that consumer's been stable for 90 days, and they want those three incentives. Is that correct? I mean, that's how I'm reading that. Specialized disability, supported employment natural supports, and ticket to work SGA, substantial gainful activity.
Okay.
So my follow-up question to that, Wendy, is were any of those authorized at the time of stability? So if they didn't request them at the time consumer was employed and then determined to be stable, then they can't come back and bill for them.
The lesson there is be talking with your CRP or job placement people so that they can be looking at these incentives and you're aware of what might be coming down the pike as far as invoicing and billing.
All right, so let's take a look at each of these individual incentives, though, that's being raised, because they have different, different pieces there. Number one, looking at the specialized disability population, more than likely this is an individual who is deaf and so that is an incentive that does apply. Okay. The supported employment natural supports incentive, the $450, that would only apply if, one, the IPE was a supported employment IPE, and two, it was written for the purpose of eventually transitioning this individual to natural supports. So the supported employment natural supports incentive, really that needs to be understood from the very beginning when you're making a referral to the CRP, that you're referring this individual and that this person is going to not have long-term support, and even though they're supported employment, because you recognize the need for them to have natural supports and you believe that there's a reasonable expectation that they'll have natural supports. So that this goes back to why it's so important at the time of the referral to the CRP to be sure that they know what is the expectation, what is the outcome expectation, not just the job title, but whether the person's going to need supports and what type of supports can be expected. So if you're going in to a referral expecting that they're going to rely on natural supports, that affects the job development experience. That affects the type of job that and where the individual accepts the employment, and then the CRP is building the natural supports around that person, and with the expectation they know they're basically working themselves out of a job there, because even though the person needs long-term help, they're not going to get the funding for it. They're going to get it from natural supports. So that incentive is very, very specific. Mm-hmm. And then the third incentive, the ticket to work, substantial gainful activity, that is one that you need to verify through program income, through Eric Schmidt, that the individual is actually achieving SGA. And when you have that verification, then if they are a Social Security ticket to work holder, then you can go ahead and proceed.
Thanks, John.
Update from Wendy, no authorizations were created for these three.
If no authorizations were created, then they can't be billed for after the fact. And this just emphasizes the talking in advance with your job developers. Do you have other questions, Erica?
Yes, Aaron Shahan. If the $200 job stability fee can be billed at stability date, then how does the CRP attach updated employment information and wages for the third month of employment with the invoice? And these go back to questions number 6 and 7.
The verification of stability is the report that triggers the payment for the stability follow-along fee. The report that the CRP provides at the third month is used to verify the 90 days of stable employment and the employment, the wages earned in that third month. And the CRP is providing that documentation because signed by the consumer or with a pay stub because they want to be paid for the incentives or they want to be paid for the $100 verification fee, employment verification fee at 90 days stable.
What else?
And are we authorizing the employment verification fee then at job coaching too?
Authorizing that. Are we authorizing the employment verification fee at the same time that we're authorizing job coaching? Is that how you
I
read?
think that's how.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we can. There's no reason not to.
I mean, if you know without beyond a shadow of a doubt that this person will not qualify for any incentives,
Right.
then that wouldn't be a problem to authorize the verification, the $100 verification fee at the time of the job coaching. That's assuming that the job development authorization is separate from the job coaching authorization for short-term job coaching or whatever. So at that point, even if you'll probably know if the 30 days applies, the 30-day rapid incentive fee, and in any of the others you would already know. So I guess the ticket to work one, you just have to be very, very clear that no other incentives apply. And if you know that, then there really wouldn't be a problem in authorizing that, adding that $100 line item to that authorization.
Yeah, I think it's safer to authorize it at the time of stability because then you'll know whether or not any other incentives apply more than likely.
Right.
You could authorize it at the time of job coaching, but if other incentives are available, then we wouldn't be able to pay the verification fee.
Right. We've told this on the CRP employment verification and placement incentive request form, right? The one with the 3 steps. That is where the CRP is asking for, or on the Employment Services Progress Report, in either of those forms, they are able to ask for the incentives that apply, and if no incentive applies, then they can check a box that says, no incentive applies, we're requesting the authorization for the fee.
Thanks, John. I'm going to read one text that came in from Eric Schmidt. It circles back to the SGA one, in Ticket to Work. He wanted us to remember that they also confirmed that the Ticket to Work is assigned to doors as well, and this is critical to paying that SGA incentive. Okay? So we're going to move forward because we have some more slides. I'm sure we'll still get. I know I'm skipping a question. But
Last question.
All right.
That keeps it goes along with it.
all right.
Okay, so are you saying counselors need to go ahead and create offs for most of these incentives in the beginning of their 90 days employment before stable date expires?
They need to request it at the time the stable date is determined.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's how they'll know what incentives they can request at that point.
And authorize.
Yeah.
Right.
Did everyone understand
Did you
that?
understand the question?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, okay.
Oh, sorry.
Sherry's question was asking about. We have reminded everyone to include with the authorization for short-term job coaching after you know the person's in the job. Then you do an authorization for short-term job coaching, and you include the $200 employment stability follow-along fee when short-term job coaching has been provided, or if they're going to transition to natural supports, you can include that fee. Now, Sherry asked, well, can we include the $100 employment verification at 90 days fee? So basically, it's the two fees that that we're saying, yeah, maybe you can go ahead if you know no other incentives apply. You can go ahead and do that $100 fee at the time of the short-term job coaching. But as Jody's saying, it's probably better to wait until they're stable. Those fees, again, are not incentives. So as far as authorizing the incentives, you would do that at the time that the CRP has said, and you agree, and the consumer agrees that they're stable.
Okay.
Number 15.
Yeah, we're on 15. We're going to kind of switch to extended services for youth, and there has been a lot of questions about this. I don't think it's being used a lot at this point, but as time goes on, it will begin. Okay, so for whom would youth extended services be used? Basic question.
Answer. These services are for youth that gained employment and have no extended services funding available, but require more than natural supports to maintain stability. Doors will pay the CRP a monthly flat rate of $550 up to 4 years until the youth turns 25 or until another extended service source becomes available, such as DDA, or the natural supports are sufficient to support that youth.
So these services must be approved through the administrative approval process on an annual basis. So just because you've approved it for 1 year, you can't automatically move on to the second year if it's still needed. You have to go through administrative approval and then add that second year to the IPE. The authorizations can be issued in 3-month increments, and the thought is at the end of every 3 months or near the end of that authorization period, you would be in contact with the consumer, the employer, whomever is part of that support team for that youth to determine if the extended services need to continue for another 3 months. And also in that, the provider must document attempts in obtaining sources of extended supports via the monthly progress report. So if this is a youth that somehow, and Jill, feel free to jump in here, if someone kind of slipped through the cracks in high school and they didn't get their DDA funding, for example, and they're 20 years old and they really need supports, DDA is not going to provide them yet, or whatever, they're 22 years old, doesn't matter. We can provide those extended services along with, in that case, a DDA provider, but we still want to work toward getting that person the long-term supports that they need. So the provider would need to indicate what they're doing to help that happen. Are they helping them with the application process? Is it just documentation that they need to finish the application process? What can we do to help that person line up their long-term extended supports? Because if we don't, they're going to reach age 25 and be out of luck. They're not going to have any more supports, not the long-term intensive supports that we're paying the CRPs to provide.
Make sense? Okay.
Yeah, so question 16. Which feeding schedule should be used prior to the transition to youth extended services?
Oddly enough, the intensive job coaching feeding schedule before transition to natural supports, makes sense, should be used so that the team may first evaluate the availability of natural supports before DOORS agrees to fund youth extended services.
With the youth extended services, are the reports coming in monthly or every 3 months?
So the question is, are the reports for youth extended services, are the reports coming in monthly or every 3 months? And the answer is monthly. If we're going to be paying $550 a month, as with everything else, if you don't have a report, you don't pay the invoice. And that report should, as Jody's mentioned, go into some detail about what are they doing to help this student find some other kind of support, whether it's the DDA application, whether it's peer network, maybe at a job site. It's got to be something.
Along with that, do we also do the natural supports checklist too?
Well, again, we're thinking through, does this person, Yes, yes,
Yeah.
you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are. I mean, what you're first trying to establish are natural supports available for this individual. Is there a reasonable expectation that natural supports will be available? So you want to be working through that. But if you are thinking that this is an individual who, the natural supports may not be available immediately, but they can be developed over time. And in the process, you need to transition. You will need to transition them over to youth extended services. Then you should proceed with getting the administrative approval to do the IPE for the supported employment leading to natural supports. And then if you come to the point where they're employed and you're ready to, those supports are not in place, then go ahead and do the approval to start the first year of youth extended services.
Thanks, John. We're on 17, yes?
Yep, 17.
All right. Question. Is short-term job coaching required to be provided before the use of intensive job coaching fading schedule for transitioning to natural supports?
So this question's come up in a lot of different arenas as I've gone around the state. So the answer is no. You're not required to use the short-term fading schedule prior to intensive job coaching for transition to natural supports. However, you may choose to do so. So if you're working with someone and you're just not clear if they're going to be able to remain stable in the job with short-term job coaching, go ahead and do the short-term job coaching, see how it goes. If it's not working so well and you think that they're going to need more intensive supports through the natural supports, then you can go ahead and authorize the natural supports. Keep in mind, though, you do not need to include those original 4 weeks. So it's two separate services. So you don't have to do administrative approval because it's going to be over $5,000 at that point. However, you do need to do administrative approval because you're changing them from the short-term job coaching on their plan, excuse me, to the job coaching to transition to natural supports.
Mm-hmm.
I think I covered all that. I didn't read it word for word.
We just want you to know that you can course correct. You can start off with an IPE for someone who you think will probably get by with this short-term job coaching, and then you can find out, this person needs a lot more help than we thought, and we need to take the time to build natural supports. That course correct is built in. You don't have to start off with short-term job coaching, but you can, and then you can course correct if needed.
Okay, question 18. If a CRP is not an approved provider through DDA or BHA, are they still able to provide DOORS-funded supported employment services?
And the answer is yes, if appropriate, and it's documented through the DOORS CRP Cooperative Agreement. Under WIOA, DOORS is able to serve a more diverse population under supported employment, such as those that qualify and will receive extended services through natural supports. A CRP in this situation would not be able to provide long-term follow-along services funded by DDA or BHA, as they are not approved with them. However, CRP could provide DOORS-funded supported employment services to those individuals that require natural supports as their extended service provider, or to youth who require youth extended services.
And that would be spelled out on their CRP's cooperative agreement as to whether or not they can provide those services. So not all CRPs would develop natural supports, and not all CRPs would work with the youth for extended services.
Sure. Okay. Question 19, can DOORS support seasonal employment through supported employment funding?
It depends. My favorite answer. It depends on how long the seasonal employment is going to last, because you have to remember, if you're putting someone in employment, the goal is to reach stability. So if it's just a 2-month or a 3-month, maybe a Christmas, holiday seasonal employment, that may not be the best idea. So for example, typically a consumer who requires support employment will not achieve stability for at least 6 weeks. And that's just a guess. It could be sooner, but that's pretty typical. So if the seasonal employment is going to last longer than 6 weeks, plus the 90 days of stability, so you're looking at 3, 4, almost 5 months at that point, then yes, stores would go ahead and support that employment. Also, if the seasonal employment is expected to lead to permanent employment, then support employment may significantly improve the chances of that consumer receiving the permanent employment. So you have to, that's why I say it depends. You really have to look at the consumer and the case and the employment. Is it something that's part of their employment goal? You know, do they want to work in, they want to be a retail sales manager or something, so they need to get some retail experience? Then yeah, by all means, go ahead and support them, even though you know that's not going to be the job that they close out in. But they need that experience in order to get to their employment goal. So it really does depend. You have to look at that on a case-by-case basis. And really, also demographically, what might be considered, you know, a yes on the shore, who someone is working from May to October, then yeah, that might be absolutely, we'll go ahead and support that. But maybe it's someone who's working, I don't know, at a ski resort at Wisp for 60 days. That might not be such a good need. So it just depends. Okay. All right. Number 20. So now we're kind of moving over into kind of miscellaneous other concerns that came in. So please clarify the timing of payment of milestone 3 for the EBPSE providers. So that's evidence-based providers of support employment.
The answer is nothing's changed for the EBPSE milestone payment structure, including that the CRP can invoice for milestone 3 after 45 days of employment. And after 45 days, the individual will transition to extended services funded by BHA. Doors may not declare a supported employment provider consumer, quote unquote, stable on the job until after the transition to extended services, which is why policy states that the 45th day is the earliest that the individual in this situation can be considered stable. So 45 days is milestone 3. Just put those together in your head. You good? All right.
No questions.
Yeah. They're all going, I can't keep up with all of this. Okay. Question 21. Do we presume individuals are eligible for door services if they are approved by BHA or DDA? Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So this question reminds me of like a difficult word problem in 5th grade or something. Like you have to look at every single word and look at the meaning of every single word. So I'm just going to reread it. Do we presume individuals are eligible for door services if they are approved by BHA or DDA? The answer is no. We do not presume eligibility based on BHA or DDA approval status. So we never presume eligibility. As a VR counselor, it is your job to determine eligibility. So that's clear. But we do expedite the eligibility determination based on the documentation received from BHA and DDA. So again, we have to get the documentation, whether it's through value options for BHA or whether it's through DDA, and we have to make sure that the documentation we're getting is enough. You know, is it sufficient? Then we can consider, once we've determined they're eligible, we can consider individuals who are approved by BHA or DDA for long-term supported employment services to be automatically Category 1. And there is, you guys don't have it on the paper copy, but on the screen, I know it's hard to see, well, not so hard there. There's a little snippet from the updated disability priority page in AWARE. So where it used to say eligible for or approved for BHA supported employment funding or DDA, I think it used to say BHA or DDA. Now it's 2 separate lines and it says approved for BHA supported employment funding or approved for DDA support employment funding. And again, this is just on the disability priority page. This is not the eligibility determination. So is that clear to everyone how they're different?
It's about semantics.
Yeah.
And it's about RSA semantics. RSA says that we cannot give over our eligibility decision-making to anyone except ourselves, our counselors.
And that legally, under WIOA, the only reason to presume eligibility is Social Security beneficiary status.
But that being the case, once we determine eligibility, we can say if they're approved for DDA funding or approved for long-term BHA funding, then we can automatically make them Category 1. Okay? They can't be eligible for DDA funding or eligible for BHA. They have to be approved to make that leap.
Approved for supported
employment.
employment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you may get something, and I think DDA is working on a way to give us the information in a more clear fashion. You may get someone who's approved for DDA services, but it's not clear if they're approved for supported employment. You would still need to look at that documentation, look at the functional limitations, look at that clearly to determine their category, because if it's not clear from DDA that they're approved for supported employment, then it's up to us to determine the category. If they are able to give us something that clearly states the individual is approved to receive supported employment funding, then we can go ahead and assume that they're Category 1. So,
But after we still gather information documenting their disability, we can't just have that.
yeah, you still need to have the documentation. I mean,
The
you need to
documentation of the disability
right.
and so forth, so you can determine the eligibility. Right. But that is information that we can get from DDA providers and so forth. It's not just DDA and their providers have more information than just that the person's approved for supported employment.
Right.
And that, so it's not like we're saying everyone has to do diagnostics to get this documentation. There is information that's available. We can use that information. So the standard is the same. The standard for BHA to say that most significantly disabled, when we have the value options documentation that they've been approved for support employment, is the same for DDA. It's the same standard. It's just that the way that we're working with BHA makes it a little bit easier to get that information in a more timely way through value options or Beacon than the process that we're using through DDA, but the information is there and we can get that from DDA. We should pursue that, or from the DDA providers.
Let me just give an example of something I've seen. So it's kind of two ends of the spectrum. So for the DDA, an individual came in, we determined eligibility. They weren't sure of the category because they hadn't received updated documentation from DDA, and I know we're all about getting, the last 3 years of the documentation, but this individual had a congenital disability. So nothing was going to change. It didn't matter if this individual was assessed when he was 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. It didn't matter. It wasn't going to change. And I saw in that particular case where the counselor decided, the documentation is too old from DDA, so I'm going to put them in Category 2 until I get another assessment done. That's where we really need to look at it carefully and look at the documentation, or maybe request additional documentation from DDA versus putting that person through another assessment when it's a type of disability that's really not going to change. So why do that? Why waste the time and the expense when that individual really could have just gone right into Category 1 because they were already approved through DDA for support employment? So you need to look at it really carefully when you're doing the category selection.
Okay, so just a few questions from site. So we no longer presume eligibility with a BHAM number? Question mark.
So we no longer presume eligibility with the BHAM number. For those of you who don't know what that is, the M number is assigned to an individual when they are approved for long-term funding.
For BHA.
For BHA, not DDA. I'm sorry, BHA.
They actually have that M number anyway. But the approval is something that we get documentation of. I mean, that M number is like our participant ID. So they have that, but the approval of it is what we need the verification of.
Mm-hmm. So if we have that approval, they can be presumed eligible.
If we have the approval, then they are understood to be order of selection Category 1.
Right. We just to be clear, we do not presume eligibility for anyone. It doesn't matter who it is. Eligibility cannot be presumed, doesn't matter who's approved them or whatever. We can expedite, expedite the eligibility determination process based on their approval and based on the documentation, but we do not presume eligibility.
If you look at the policy in Chapter 800 around the supported employment and VHA in particular, we are referring to that the counselor has access to documentation about the disability and the functional limitations, and that that information is being used to expedite the eligibility determination. And then the order of selection piece is understood to be most because the person is approved for VHA long-term funding.
So follow-up question to that. Where would we get the actual medical documentation to determine someone with VHA eligible? Is it attached in Beacon? Is that actually Beacon. Attached down Beacon? Because before it was just the code.
It's available, well, and the code is related to a specific diagnosis, which is an approved priority population. And we have a list of the VHA priority populations as an attachment to Section 800 of our RSM. When they are a priority population for VHA, and they have those diagnoses in place, then we can glean from that they are eligible and that they are meeting the requirements of Order of Selection Category 1 when they are approved for long-term funding for support employment.
Right. I would just add, I mean, everyone is unique. Everyone's an individual. So two people might have the same mental health diagnosis. That doesn't mean that they're both going to be treated the same way. That might mean that that's their mental health diagnosis and you can use that for your eligibility determination without having to get, reams of documentation. But you still might want to get that documentation, to determine what the course of action should be. You know, just because they have this diagnosis doesn't mean that you're going to do steps 1, 2, and 3. They may want training. They may want something different. So WIA has opened that door up a little bit more. We still have the same eligibility criteria and the expedited eligibility, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't go a step further and have a little bit more of a discussion on what the next steps are.
For the comprehensive assessment of need. And that goes back to the initial interview, and no matter who the consumer is, when you're doing the initial interview, we want to know that the counselors had a discussion and documented in the case note the disability and functional limitations of the disability, among the other things, the employment experience and interest and next steps.
Right.
Nice. So just to go back to the VHA part, Michelle has a question. Sounds as though people should be printing off more than just the DOORS application and Beacon for eligibility purposes. We've been under the impression that if they can see they are approved in VHA, the application is enough.
We are the policy says that the counselor will document a review of the disability and functional limitation information that's available through Beacon, that's would be expected to be seen either on the disability priority page or the eligibility determination page.
And then we have a question about DDA. Would an IP from DDA that lists the services they receive be sufficient to be automatic most significant?
I'm not sure.
So the question is, would an individualized plan from DDA that lists the services they're receiving from DDA be sufficient to make an automatic significant? And the response is, it depends. Is that what you would say?
I think Jill's phoning a friend.
Jill's calling in a favor.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll have to come back to that one. All right, let's move on to the last questions, and we will try to get to all the rest of the text questions, but there is a really important and nice summary shot up on the screen now.
Yep.
I'll let you share that.
Okay, so the summary, we just wanted to kind of put in one place what each of the 3 fading schedules, so we're kind of moving back to that. So the first one for short-term job coaching, obviously the hourly job coaching is what applies. The incentives apply if the provider has prior authorization from doors for job development. Okay. And the $100 employment stability verification fee at 90 days and the $200 employment stability follow-along fee apply. So again, you have to follow the rules for each one of them, but they all apply. And then same thing for the fading schedule for support employment plans, including transition to long-term funding. This would be your BHA and DDA. You have your hourly job coaching. The incentives apply, again, as long as there's prior authorization. The stability date can be entered at day 45, and the transition to long-term funding begins. And neither the $100 employment stability verification fee nor the $200 employment stabilization follow-along fee apply. And that's because they're getting that long-term supports already. And then the fading schedule for support employment plans, including the expectation to transition to natural supports. Again, you can provide hourly job coaching prior to that. It's hourly job coaching. You can provide the short-term job coaching prior if you choose to do so. The incentives apply as long as there's prior authorization from doors for job development. And they can also authorize the support employment natural supports placement incentive, which is $450. And then on this one, the $200 employment stability follow-along fee is applicable. So we just wanted to put it like in a brief kind of chart to let you know which ones apply to each one of the 3 fading schedules. So it's kind of a summary of everything that's in the questions. And then the last page just tells you if you have any questions, who you can contact. You can email John or Darlene if it's about CIE, or you can email Jill or Derek or me if it's about supported employment.
That being said, there are a bunch of chat messages that you out in the audience can't see, luckily. And we haven't been able to address them all. I mean, there are a bunch of regarding specifically now BHA and DDA and eligibility. And so John and I just had a quick conference. We're going to check in with Kate and Tony. Tony doesn't know it, but we're checking in with Kate and Tony. And we're going to take those questions and address them and send out clarification about a lot of the stuff that we've just discussed. Because, as some people have pointed out, well, that's not what policy says, or that's not how I'm reading it. So we do want to be clear in the instructions that we give, and when changes might need to be made in RSM, make those changes accordingly. Woo! All right, that being said, we missed it by 5 minutes, but that's not too bad. It's 10 of 12. We did pretty darn good. This has been recorded. Should you have something you need to do while you're having lunch at your desk someday, you want to just review these stellar back and forth repartees that we've had. Thank you all for your time. Any other sign-off messages? Nope.
Just thank
We're
you,
good.
everyone.
Thanks.
Take care, everyone. And everyone out there.